Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific writers with us today, Garrett M. Brown and Paul Lichtman. Garrett will read first, and then Paul. Garrett M. Brown is an actor, writer, playwright, and visual artist. His poems have been read at Ensemble Theater LA and published in the Beliermo Chronicle. His plays have been produced in Los Angeles and New York City. His drawings and paintings have been exhibited around the United States. In fact, one of his pieces is on display at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York City. A doodle he did at the Whitney Bistro was admired by the cafe manager. It's hanging in her office. And three of his stories are in the recent Lagoon House Press anthology, Three Writers, One Photographer, published in 2023. Tin Sea, a memoir gone rogue, debuted in September 2024. He's married to the writer and poet Marie Pal Brown. They live in Long Beach, and like his creative comrades of Lagoon House Press, he too was mentored by the beloved writer and poet Holly Prado Northup. Garrett's Tin Sea, a memoir gone rogue, abundantly filled with humanity, love, friendship, artistry, art, and discovery, is precisely and compellingly told. He has a great ear for dialogue. He really had such an understanding of vision at a young age, a resplendent book. Here's an astonishing writer, Garrett M. Brown.
Thank you, Harry. And Paul, good to see you. And thanks, Allegra, everyone, for putting this together. This is Tin Sea, a memoir gone rogue, for Kathleen Jane and Johnny D, in memory of Lexi Helms and her boys, Sam and Mike. And there's a quote here from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I don't like work, no man does, but I like what is in the work, the chance to find yourself, your own reality for yourself, not for others, what no other man can ever know. They can only see the mere show and never can tell what it really means. And then we begin with part one. That's actually a drawing, a pen and ink of the interior of my car, my Peugeot Titine, who accompanied me down to Tennessee. Chapter one. It was a summer of light. It was a summer of longing and wonder and fear. It was a summer of newfound freedom, of anger too, and frustration and helplessness. It was a summer of wanting so much and then being unable to reach that perfection or expectation. It was a summer of fitfulness and blue moods and depression, of boredom too. And it was a summer of great and wonderful solitude, as much as it was a summer of loneliness. Everything began to unravel that spring, 1971, to come undone and fall into place at the same time. Kathy was finally responding to me, even getting a little clingy. My best buddy, John Derlin, had phoned with summer plans. In 2 weeks, all of us, the classes of 1971, were going to graduate. There was a bright sadness in the air. There was an urgency as well as a laziness, as in no more, enough. And of course, there was this curiosity about the real world. What was that? If college hadn't been real, what had it been? Where had I been the last 4 years? But the main intrigue for me was this slowly evolving inner dictum. I'm going to be an artist, a painter, and somehow express things. Perhaps even bring a new way of seeing into the world. Of course, this was all basically unspoken, internal, and confused. I was a young upstart from suburban Connecticut who was supposed to become a doctor, but defaulted, broke the ranks. I'd never felt totally comfortable among these mostly well-to-do prep boys, and now it was okay. That alienated persona had joined the late 60s, early 70s milieu of hippie, strange, offbeat, and for some reason I was fitting in again as an outsider, the existential artiste, which already was becoming so well-defined that it might show up in a VW ad if we weren't careful. Buy a VW Bug. It'll make your dad's house look bigger. And your existential artist friends will want to sit around, get high, and ponder it, or something like that. But the thing is, I didn't have a lot of existential artist friends, none that I knew of. I'd become a kind of loner. I was a straight arrow, too. Oh, I did let my hair go somewhat, enough to discover that this once athlete's crew cut was harboring these wonderful, lush curls, Kathy's words. That's another thing. I was an athlete, played freshman football, basketball, and then the rest of my college career, I actually started on my college hoops team, was co-captain senior year. And now I was an artist? But I had this gift, had it since I was a kid. I used to copy the characters from Archie comics. I love those big busted Veronicas and Bettys. Superman, too, muscles and flying through the air. When I was 12 or so, I stole into my dad's closet and his Playboy bunnies became my models. A book in our Darlington Town Library said, if you can draw the human form, you can draw anything. So I did that. I drew all manner of human forms, particularly female ones, and drawing anything else was easy. Those 3 dimensions made into 2. Perspectives, illusions, subtleties, master those, and the other wrinkles become doable. In junior high, Mr. Levine taught us how to do woodcuts, silk screen, even how to create our own handmade books. We did mosaics as well. He was a great fan of Ben Shahn, but I had no notions of becoming an artist. It wasn't something you even thought about in the bedrooms of New York City, where doctors and lawyers and businessmen raised their families. Then a few years later, my junior year at Amherst, the art impulse had revived out of necessity. But it rose up in me with such desire and ability, too. I needed some easy classes to offset my pre-med requisites, organic chemistry and thermodynamics. I took a writing class with Mr. Clark, where we were writing short autobiographical essays. I loved it. I get a thematic notion on Monday, and by Wednesday, I begin writing it in my head, type it up on Thursday, and hand it in Friday's class. Studio 101 was an actual painting class in oils. When I was 12, I had a set of oils, did a very heavy-handed oil painting of a single sailboat at sea. Now we were painting from a live model, a buxom girl named Maggie from Smith, and I was enamored with her and with painting. Funny, there were 2 other jocks in the class, Ted and Doug. Ted was truly gifted and would become a gifted painter and eventually an art teacher. Doug, not so much. His talents remained on the football field and eventually a career in medicine. But in that painting class, all the labels dropped off. We were not jocks or math whizzes or chemistry nerds, but varying degrees of would-be painters. Those classes, the writing, the painting, became these resurrected joys. The middle of my junior year, early winter, 1969, about 11 a.m., the dean of students had me sit down in his spare white-walled office. The Marine dean, we called him, red hair, crew cut, a hefty man who had served in the Marines, a straight shooter who could be funny too. So, Gary, we got good news and bad news. Oh? Yes, he kept eyeing me quietly, almost sullenly. Okay. This pre-med thing, yes? Okay, look, he was eyeing an open file on his desk. You're flunking organic chemistry and you're getting a C in thermodynamics. Oh no, really? I bowed my head, oh God. But this is the strange thing which I don't quite understand, yes? I raised my head even as I already felt dizzy, forsaken. You're getting an A in this painting 101 with Mr. Porter and an A in Mr. Clark's writing class. What's going on? Bit numb, it was a cue. I mumbled and muttered, but essentially I told the dean that I needed to sort things out, that I would get back to him. He nodded and said, yes, I hope you will. Get back to me, and soon. I shook his hand and thanked him. He gave me that very straight, sincere, and thorough eyeing. I did not linger. From the Marine Dean's office in Johnson Chapel, I marched across the main common, past the Robert Frost Library, down the hill to what was once a grand piece of 19th century architecture, the Fairweather Physics Building, now converted into this burgeoning arts confab where labs have been turned into lecture halls and art studios. and where Mr. Fairfield Porter, the first time newly appointed artist in residence, also had his modest studio. Just as you come up to the second floor, veer to the left, away from the bigger studio space where 13 of us were learning how to paint in oils. The studio door was ajar. I knocked lightly once. Yes, come in. As I entered, along the weathered wooden wall to the right of this very thin corridor were several taped up postcards, one of a Giacometti pen and ink, and another of a very fine pencil rendering by William de Kooning of his wife Elaine. I was surprised that late morning. I knew de Kooning only as an abstract painter. Once through this brief hall, around its corner to the right stood Mr. Porter, brush in hand, eyeing a big canvas, at least 6 by 8 feet, a tight fit in this smallish nook of a studio. Oh, hello, Gary. Hi, sir. We both paused. He continued to watch the canvas. I continued to watch him, and then the soft, painterly pastel images in oil on the canvas. A dog was standing on the first step of 2, waiting to enter the screen door along the ribbed siding of a gray house. Beyond the dog were lawn and trees, and then the grand view of a bay, with several boats, sailboats, and rowboats, and beyond them on the horizon, distant hills that were actually islands with a sultry blue sky above. I don't like that boat. Sir? He pointed, and I focused on the foremost boat, pinkish shading, port to bow, left to right. I don't think it quite works. Well, I like that shade of pink, I said, but I wonder if it shouldn't be more like a lavender? Maybe so. Did you want something? Mr. Porter was not one for small talk, which was refreshing in these often much too academic halls of verbal dexterity and bravado. He was a contrast to the then stars of Amherst, Leo Marx, Benjamin DeMott, and George Kateb. I just met with the dean of students, and well, I'm not doing so well in my pre-med classes, but in painting and writing, my grades are very good, and I guess I need to know, you are an artist. What? I think you should look at Corot's paintings. That nude study you did reminds me. Take a look. Oh, okay. Also, those watercolors of yours, the way you don't go right to the edge, the way you leave bits of white space. Yes? Take a look at Maurice Prendergast. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? I watched him as he so gently but evenly eyed me. There was no flourish about him. He wore a blue linen long-sleeve shirt, the sleeves rolled up, as well as his usual light brown corduroy slacks. Next to him on a high stool was his palette, an expanse of 18 by 24-inch clear glass, the pigments dotting across the top, the oil and turpentine in small bottles nearby, the mixings below the colored lineup. The one medium-sized brush still in hand was now at his side as he watched me and then checked again with the painting. No, sir, thank you. He nodded. I nodded, turned and departed. It was after the winter break when I returned to Mr. Porter's studio that he showed me the finished painting. I was stunned. The pink boat had been changed to lavender. I immediately returned to Johnson Chapel. The Marine Dean was still in his office, and I told him, "Sir, I'd like to become a fine arts major." "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, then. I will make the necessary changes. Fine arts it is." "Thank you, sir." I remember the midday sun barely breaking through the wintry New England clouds and fast walking down the hill to the social dorms, a fast walk that became an exultant jog, saying to myself, "Oh my God, I'm going to become an artist." An artist. Oh my God, what in the world am I doing? And yet I was ecstatic. I was a free man. Now, 2 years later, with a cockeyed sense of confidence, this mix of innocence, naivete, and an emboldened curiosity, I was going to graduate with my Amherst class of 1971 and become an artist. Madness. And yet my folks, well, this was the phone call when things first unloosened. "Hey, Mom, Dad, you there?" Yeah, we're here," said Dad. "Oh, Gary, how are you?" Fine, Mom. So listen, I don't think I want to become a doctor." "Oh," says Mom. Dad is silent. "No, I had a meeting with the dean. You know this man I told you about, Mr. Porter? Well, he thinks, you see, I'm going to become a fine arts major. Oh, Gary, really? Mom actually sounded pleased. And teach, said Dad. No, Dad. Paint. What? Houses? Maybe if I have to support the painting, but I think I really want to become an artist, a painter. Oh, Gary, you're so gifted. You really are. This is very exciting, isn't it, Brownie? Yeah, real exciting. I need a refill. Caroline, I'm up in the kitchen. You want another? No, honey, you go ahead. I'm fine. Good night, Dad. See ya. Love you. Yeah, same here. See ya. Click. Oh, Gary, darling, this is very exciting. Are you pleased? Yeah, Mom. Yeah. We spoke a little longer, but actually, I think my dad was relieved. My older brother, Sandy, was finishing up med school in the last year of a residency at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. Dad had idolized his father, who'd been a doctor in Boston, the first one to own an x-ray machine. No question, Dad lauded the medical profession, but perhaps one doctor in the family was enough. But an artist, painter, I had no idea what I was doing. And then that spring of 1971, a few weeks before graduation, I saw this quirky, wild movie over at Jim Goodwin's frat house. It was called Harvey and starred Jimmy Stewart. That's when things somehow fell into place. Chapter 2. It was a weekday night at the Sigma Chi frat house. James Goodwin, known as the Good Wink, also the Good Dude, was up from Connecticut visiting. He graduated the year before, and he and Linda married last summer, hadn't quite settled yet. Jim invited me to come over. I stood there eyeing the TV and the empty sofa. You coming down? I'll buy you a brewski. Yeah, sure. What is this? I pointed to the TV. Oh, this? Harvey, Jimmy Stewart, the big white rabbit that no one can see but him. You've never seen this movie? No, I like Jimmy Stewart, though. Oh, you'll love him in this. Listen, stay, watch it. I'll come up in a bit, okay? I love this flick. It's so out there. He left. I stayed, mesmerized. A middle-aged man, Elwood P. Dowd, played by Jimmy Stewart, has a friend, a close friend, a drinking buddy named Harvey, a compadre, a soul brother. Alter ego? No. A rabbit, a 6-foot-tall rabbit. But this rabbit named Harvey is invisible. Only this man, Elwood P. Dowd, can see him. And for this, he's considered mad, loopy, crazy. He'd gone to Yale, was en route to be a big success, a somebody in that town, took care of his mother, lived with her, in fact, never married. When she died, the house became his, the money's all, and he continued to work and then not. He invited his sister Vita and her daughter, 30-year-old Myrtle May, to come live with him. His sister saw the change in him after their mother's death. It was also about the time Harvey joined him. Oh, Mother, you talk about Harvey as if he really did exist, says Myrtle May. Myrtle May, there are some things you must learn in life, and I hope you never do. Myrtle May, tall, gangly, a blonde olive oil, so wants to meet a man, a true love, and yet she can't, living there with her crazy uncle, Elwood. I made myself comfortable on the sofa, the dusk outside the frat house blending into this curious black and white movie that I continued to watch alone. Gradually, I'd get hints of a party slowly beginning to gather as sounds would drift upstairs, the clatter of glasses, beer bottles, laughter, songs. It tickled me, this movie. It moved me. For you see, says Jimmy Stewart in his slow, chivalrous drawl, no one ever brings anything small into a bar. And then I introduce them to Harvey, and he's bigger and more important than anything they've ever told me. Harvey. Elwood's sister Vita is finally persuaded to try and put Elwood into an asylum, Chumley's Rest, where Dr. Chumley's wife comes to pick up her husband, and she encounters the warm and friendly Elwood, who begins to explain who and what Harvey is. Oh, yes, Mrs. Chumley. A puka, and my best friend, too. Many's the time Harvey has said to me, I'd do anything for you. Harvey. Allow me to give you my card. Harvey and I would love you to join us for dinner. How's 7 o'clock? Fine. Oh, if you need to reach me, use that number. The other number's not in use. Harvey. That's right, says Elwood. Harvey can look at a clock and stop it. And then you can go anywhere you like with anyone you like for as long as you like. And when you return, not 1 second will have passed. Harvey's not only taken care of time and space, but any objections too. Harvey is not a movie. It was a manner, a code, a way of living. And as the movie reached its tender conclusion, it struck me. This is what an artist is. An artist has a vision. Like Elwood, who sees and talks with the invisible Harvey, so does an artist behold and carry and see this vision of his work, which he dialogues with invisibly, since no one else can see it. Oftentimes, the artist is considered weird, unfathomable, even crazy, just as Elwood was being treated. But in fact, like an artist with a vision, here comes a way of seeing the world in all its detail, magic, and wonder. And like Harvey, art too, be it poem, book, film, music, or painting, time stops. And as Elwood says in the movie, you can go anywhere you like, with anyone you like, for as long as you like, within that work of art. I'm not sure I ever said goodbye to Jim. I just eased my way off the sofa and out the door. I was both present and not. I was still with Elwood P. Dowd, and I was on my way back to my dorm. Instead of returning by way of side streets and parking lots, I decided to walk along through the Amherst Town Commons. I was enjoying this cool late-night ramble. It was so quiet. The air was cool and damp. All of May and spring become sweet and a little sad, too. This was all about to end. There was the green embankment, and on top the big old octagon building looking like a darkened ship. I stood across from the administration building, lit up as if some musical were about to be performed among its multitude of steps and Greek-like columns. I remembered the rally once held there, one of the Vietnam War protests. I had one of my sketchbooks out and poised as I hurriedly inked in faces, the crowd, the swish and swill of light, dark, so many students, mostly guys, but girls from Holyoke, Smith, UMass also, a few. I was not a protester, not really. I didn't believe in this war, misguided, bullying. It was not the America I believed in. My draft number had been low, 51. Was that what had motivated me? I wanted to savor life, relish it, paint it, and create it, really, as art can sometimes do, not kill it. True, I had my moments of rage on the playing fields, which felt murderous, but day in, day out, to go off killing? No. So I conscientiously objected, prepared papers, procured statements from my teachers, my friend Joe, who was a Marine, a minister, also Mr. Porter. They bore witness to my conscience, my anti-war feelings and beliefs. And then my mother, my dad too, reminded me how bad my acne had been over the years. My acne? I revisited Dr. Clary, who re-examined me, updated my medical papers, and recommended that I not be considered for the military. The Springfield, Massachusetts Medical Board agreed. Open wounds, the papers noted, not fit for service in Southeast Asia. What? That's it? Had I somehow cheated? What about serving as a CO in the military? Everyone said, drop it, let it go, be thankful. And my CO papers, the letters I'd collected, they became pieces of my puzzle, an autobiographical collage, a marker that called up in me a gathering honesty. Who am I? What do I really want to do with my life? You want to spend the summer together? It was Derwin's voice on the phone. I was back in my dorm room alone. It was a full throttle May evening, late night, not cold, not hot, and Derwin was probing. Gare, you there? Yeah, kind of. You want me to go over it again? Yes, please. So this will be our last summer together as best buddies, as bachelors. Why? Brooke and me, come on, you're going to be our best man. Right. You know this, we talked about this a while ago. Yeah, did I wake you up or something? No, it's just, I saw this. You and me, buddy, in Tennessee. What about Tennessee? Garrett, that's what I'm telling you. I got 4 other guys lined up. You'll make 5. That's my crew. We drive to Nashville the first week of June. They tell us a few things. We get our books and then door to door, buddy. We make some good money and have one last big summer together, right? What about Brooke? What about her? Then you're not going to marry her? Garrett, I'm marrying her. She's marrying me. But that's next summer. Next summer, right, okay. And this summer is Tennessee, selling books, best buddies. Right, this summer. I mentioned this to you, about a month ago. You didn't have any plans then. Have things changed? No, that's it. I just think I've been looking forward to having no plans, no classes, no, schedule, just life, living, seeing. We will. Once we get to Nashville, get our assignment, Big Jim, my point guy, promised he'd put us together in the same territory. Territory? Town, somewhere in Tennessee. Right. God, where is Tennessee? In the South, down there somewhere. We'll find it. Right. Okay. So you're in? Like Flynn. Great, Garrett. This will be so good. Going door to door. You're a natural. That big smile of yours. Daryl, don't sell me, okay? You're my best friend, and I want us to be together. That's why I'm doing this. Thanks, Garrett. Have you ever seen this movie, Harvey? The Big White Bunny? Yeah. No. We talked some more. I tried to tell John about Harvey. He didn't get it. Well, I didn't get it either. Not yet. But this movie, it had excited me or catapulted me or what? What had it done to me? What was going on? The big picture, the bigger picture, college, sure, Tennessee, okay, but John, my best buddy, our lives, our families, the journey ahead, a move towards something grand and yet quite simple. Here's my card. Have you met my friend Harvey? When? Well, when can you come for dinner? Time. We do have time, but time is money. I've been constantly told. Time is of the essence. Do you know what time it is? It's later than you think. And the evening wore on. Isn't that beautiful? I like to say that again. And the evening wore on. Something had clicked, perhaps snapped. I was getting off. This is my stop. Stop. Yes, no more. Thanks for all those classes, all those books, all that reading and hustling. Hurry, you'll be late. Class starts at... Thanks for all the schedules and formats. And 3 exams today, 1 on Friday. That final paper's due next week. Oh, God. Oh, time. Thanks. And goodbye to all that. Please, can I go now? Can I start my life? Could I at least have it, be with it, savor it? Find it first. Okay, but love, marriage, kids, career. Whoa. Slow down. Let's graduate first. And begin. Begin what? Here's my card. Dow, Elwood P. Thanks, Harry. And all.
Thank you, Garrett, for such a magnificent story, magnificently told, the joy and wonderment in it, the precision and the clarity. You know, we have like 1 minute left. I love the section on Harvey. I remember reading it. It was just magic. And the relationship of Harvey to Jimmy Stewart's character and your relationship to your art, what exists between you and your art, even though other people don't see it. But, you know, you're just so precise. We don't have much time left, but this is an epic, you know, and I have a million questions to ask you, but, you know, you're just such a Renaissance man, actor, writer, drawer, artist, you know, in the beginning. I'm glad you read those first 2 chapters, and what a memory you have. And I'd like to learn more about how you put the book together, when you started, etc. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Harry.
Your writing and your reading are just immaculate. And you bring it, everything you do, alive right here and now. And it was just captivating. So thank you, Garrett M. Brown, for 2 chapters from Tim C., a marvelous memoir. And it couldn't be better. You're just a perfecto, Garrett. So thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it. Great. Thank you.
Our next reader is Paul Lichtman. Paul Lichtman is best known for opening communist Eastern Europe to American filmmaking, producing Sophie's Choice, High Road to China, Winds of War, War and Remembrance, and the Warner Brothers series, The New Adventures of Robin Hood. Prior to that, he was a professional actor in Barney Miller, Mary Tyler Moore, and a host of others. He won an award from the Writers Guild for having written All in the Family and the Bob Newhart Show, 2 of the top 100 shows in the last 75 years. Educated at the University of Pennsylvania and Columbia Law School, he worked as a tax lawyer and entertainment lawyer before embarking to the creative arena. He hails from the Bronx, New York. Paul Lichtman has an extraordinary memory. His memoir, Filming Hollywood Movies in Communist Countries, is concise and copious, insightful, surprising. He's a masterful storyteller. Quote, the essence of the theme of the book, Paul said, is how destiny spoke for me. End of quote. Here's a wonderful writer, Paul Lichtman.
Well, thank you, Harry. The cover of the book, The Filming of Hollywood Movies in Communist Countries Where the Money Tears but the Toilet Paper Won't. The first part is the introduction to my destiny. Walking the streets of Eastern Europe. I walked the streets of Eastern Europe for over 30 years. I never planned it that way, but that's why I feel it was destined for me. I used to love to walk those streets in the summer. I would dart from one side to another, looking at shops that don't exist in America. Specialty shops, like those selling fountain pens or knives or taffy. In the winter, it was different. In the late fall, the Arctic winds blow over the steppes of Russia, through Lithuania, and down through Yugoslavia. The cold is brutal. No matter how many layers of clothes I would wear, I was frozen to the bone. The uneven cobblestone streets made the walks a little bit more treacherous, especially in wet or snow weather. So head down, trying not to slip. I walked slowly, trying desperately not to pee in my pants, which the weather wants me to do. These are the times my mind plays therapist. My inner voice can be both my friend or foe, and I often don't know which voice will appear. My inner voice asks me question after question about life, and my life in particular. What am I doing here? Is a question that comes up all the time. What am I doing walking the streets, freezing, when I come from a state of sunshine, California? I tell myself this has to be a plan from the universe. I would talk to myself, reprimanding myself. You were a tax lawyer for a major corporation. You were an entertainment lawyer. You were a professional actor and a professional writer. And you gave up all of this for walking the streets of Eastern Europe? And then one winter night, I was walking back to my hotel with the cold going through my bone and my bladder bursting at the seams when I saw an open bar. Driven by the need to pee and wanting a hot chocolate as a nightcap, I stopped. When I entered the bar, a group of 5 studio workers greeted me with smiles, everyone wanting to buy me a drink. One of the men said out loud, "Mr. Paul, so good to see you. When I see you, I know work is coming." Every one of my studio friends and workers insisted in buying me drinks, hard drinks, not the hot chocolate I had planned for. I left the bar a little drunk, but had the answer to why I was in Eastern Europe instead of California. It was my destiny to bring business and expertise to these emerging countries. I opened up Eastern Europe to American filmmaking. This book is how I heard my destiny. The Siberiad. In the fall of 1976, I was doing sporadic acting parts and occasional television scripts. My son Jordan was 5 years old, and I was coaching his soccer team. Not that I knew anything about soccer, but Little League soccer was the sport of the moment, and many fathers like me were basically roped into coaching his kids' team. And one day in September, the phone rings. My writing agent, Peter Duchot, called to tell me that Mary Hartman, the show, wanted me to staff write full-time for this show at a good salary. I could not disband this team of 5-year-olds and told Peter that, and I turned down the job. "Well, I wish you a lot of luck," he said, "but I have to resign you as I don't represent soccer coaches. I represent writers." I felt devastated, but I thought I did the right thing. But now I had no writing agent to help me get my jobs. No agent is death in Hollywood. I felt even lower as I turned down a working gig and lost an agent. And what other agent would sign me as a writer not available to work? It was a good thing that Terry had a job doing marketing research for film and television shows. It was December of that year. Her boss, Hugh Ferry, visited us at Christmas and gave me a book as a present. The book, written by Stanislaw Lem. Lem was the Hemingway of Poland. More than 60 books to his name, which about 20 were translated into English. One of them was The Siberiad. At the time, I thought that this comedy could be written and translated for the American film market. The only problem was that Lem still lived in Poland, which was still very communist. After contacting the Polish embassy in Washington, I was invited to come and talk to them. I had an 8x10 actor's headshot I could bring with me, but I was now going to Washington as a potential producer. So I needed a business card. I ran over to Lancashire Boulevard, where a printer gave me 10,000 cards for $10. I came back and showed Terry my card. She looked at it and said, Paul Lichtman Productions, and she immediately asked me what I had produced, pretending to be a Polish inquisitor. She was right. I ran back to Lancashire Boulevard and had the printer print new cards, Paul Lichtman Company, made up. Perfect. The conference room at the embassy in Washington was something out of a spy movie, so I thought nobody was smiling. One of the Polish officials looked at my card and asked if this was my home or my office. I told him I was between offices. Not a lie, just 10 years between offices. I told him my idea about co-productions would be a great cultural event and a sign of peace between these two countries. And the movies could make a lot of money. Well, that caught their attention. Smiles and enthusiasm. They said they would call me in a week. I was ecstatic. I thought this meeting went perfect. I told them my family was Polish, and I felt that there was a bond. I liked them, and I thought they liked me. They understood co-production with American film companies could make money for Poland. We departed with warm handshakes. I rented a room in a friend's office and waited for the Poles to call me. I sat and waited and waited. Nothing from the Poles. After determining that the idea of co-productions was more viable than the book and Poland, I contacted European studios and production companies and asked if they were interested in production with American partners. I sought the advice of an old retired motion picture agent, Paul Rosen. Paul started the career of actors like Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Sylvester Stallone, and others. Paul's advice to me was go to the Cannes Film Festival and then visit the studios that were interested in co-production in person. That book changed my life. My only regret is never meeting Stanislaw Lem, whose book, The Siberiad, was my guiding light into this great career. So the first time in Cannes. In May of 1977, I went to the Cannes Film Festival. The hotels in town were booked solid. If you could get a hotel, you had to book it for the entire length of the festival for 2 weeks, whether you stayed there the entire time or not. I was able to find the Hotel Clarice, which was about a 20-minute walk into town, a small hotel where a few American outliers to the film studio were staying. Cannes was awesome, especially for first-time attendees. The Quasero Boardwalk, as it's known in America, was crowded, not just with film people, but ordinary tourists who came to Cannes to get a glimpse of a celebrity. It was so invigorating to breathe the ocean air while walking along the topless beach with beautiful bodies strewn throughout the sand. No place like Cannes in great weather. Cannes was a great learning experience for me. Even though I was in the business, I now saw for the first time how films were bought and sold, co-produced mostly by European film groups. The Americans weren't doing that. Cannes showed me all the various parts of the film business. I went from booth to booth and pitched my story to anyone who would listen. Everyone I pitched responded positively and made me feel I was on the right course. Many from the communist sphere countries were not there because they could not get the hard currency necessary for a travel abroad. We stayed in Cannes the entire time. Terry went back home to Jordan. I went on in my search. Yugoslavia was next. In the 1970s, Zagreb Airport was a typical third world airport. The government had no incentive or the money to make the airport comfortable. The airport was dark and dingy with an unpleasant odor. There were quite a few armed soldiers for the size of the airport. I had to fill out form after form stating what I was bringing into the country: cameras, calculators, any other equipment, cash, what currency, traveler's checks. Uniform personnel kept approaching me, asking me for my passport. Not just looking at it, some gave it back, others took my passport and disappeared for a while. Made me uneasy every time it happened. Finally, out of the airport, I was greeted by my host, Milan Lubic. He was director of Viva Films, a small film studio in Ljubljana. He was a most generous host. The first thing he did was give me a wad of Yugoslav dinars to spend locally. He put me up at the Hotel Toplica in Lake Bled in Slovenia. This grand hotel on a most beautiful lake with a castle in the middle was Gestapo headquarters for Southern Europe. Milan took me on a tour of almost all of Slovenia, one of the republics of Yugoslavia, and explained the complicated history and politics of the country. Yugoslavia was a beautiful country with a political system that was neither capitalist like the West, nor was it communist like the East. Tito held the Southern Slav republics together, republics that have fought for years, with some hatred going back to the year 600 AD. The republics, some Catholic, some Protestant, some Muslim, and some Serbian Orthodox. Republics were influenced by what countries they bordered on. Slovenia had Austrian and Italian influence, Macedonia, Greek, Croatia, Austrian, Bosnia and Herzegovinian were Muslims, where minarets were prevalent, like in the Mideast. I was in love with Yugoslavia at first sight. We talked about the film potential in Yugoslavia, and Milan told me that the studio that could work with American producers is one in the next republic, Croatia, Jadran Films. It was one of the largest in Europe, he said, with 5 sound stages. Mike Mihelic and Jurica Peruzovic, the co-heads of the studio, came from Zagreb to Slovenia to meet me. Milan also told me about the U.S. Yugoslav Economic Council taking place in Dubrovnik at that time. Dubrovnik, the walled city. It was a conference of corporations that do business in Yugoslavia. Dow Chemical, Minnesota Mining, McDonnell Douglas, on and on. He suggested I go and talk to them about the film business. I went to Dubrovnik and dropped into the council. I obviously never registered, but they treated me royally. They were all intrigued by the movie business. I did learn of the problems American companies faced in doing business in Yugoslavia. I learned about blocked funds. I learned about countertrade. I learned about the debts that the Yugoslav banks had with American companies. Lawrence Eagleburger was Secretary of State under George H.W. Bush. I met Eagleberger at the council in 1977 when he was ambassador to Yugoslavia. We chatted about films. He was interested in all aspects, from production to distribution. We spent a lot of time together, and I promised to let him know when an American company comes to produce a film in Yugoslavia. I would see Eagleberger quite often when I visit Yugoslavia. At the Yugoslav Council meeting, I met Jack Utley, who worked for McDonnell Douglas. He was head of the countertrade department. You see, when McDonnell Douglas sold a plane to a hard currency limited country like Eastern Europe or Africa, McDonnell Douglas had to take a small amount of cash, and the rest were given in products to be sold in the West to pay for the plane. Jack wasn't sure about the movie business and how it could fit in with their sale of planes, but he was intrigued by the possibility. What I learned at Cannes from the U.S. Yugoslav Council was incredible. It was the University of Higher Learning. I came back from Cannes and the Eastern European trip at the end of June, beginning of July of 1977. It was as though I went to graduate school. I learned about so much of the business. Arnie Fishman, an old friend of my wife, Terry, had worked at the same research company in New York. And Arnie moved to California with his wife and toddler Jesse, who at that time was the same age as my son Jordan. Arnie had a great entrepreneurial spirit, and he and I became partners. I felt really good about that. Arnie was smart, and because he would take any side in a discussion, he made you look at all sides. I stayed in touch with Jack Utley, my new friend from Cannes. And I got a call a few months later from him telling me of the McDonald trade mission going to Yugoslavia. A number of American companies that could help McDonnell Douglas in its plane sales were invited. Yugoslavian companies were invited to meet with Americans to help increase Yugoslav trade. Inkovent, our company that was now called, was invited on this trade junket. The McDonald Trade Group went to the large formal dinner party hosted by Ambassador Lawrence Eagleberger. American guests, which were invited their Yugoslav counters to the party, I invited Mihalic and Peruzovic to come to Belgrade. They came. When we came into the room, Eagleberger spotted me from the other side, and he came towards me with open arms like he had known me a lifetime. He even remembered my name, which was astonishing. All of my trade partners from the trip and the Yugoslav officials that were invited wondered who I was. Instant credibility helped me do the business with banks and showed Radran that I was real, determined, and credible. Arnie and I went to Zagreb on our tour to the studio. Mike Milic and Peruzovic were not only impressed that I was invited to the trade mission by McDonnell Douglas, but extremely impressed by my Eagleberger connection. And a matter of fact, so was I. When we saw Yadran in November, they told me that Columbia owed them $50,000 for work on the Tin Drum, which won the Academy Award. And they couldn't seem to get through to Columbia for the payment. Asked me if I could help. I came home and called Columbia, and I called Jonathan Dolgen and arranged to have the payment sent immediately. I felt really comfortable with my role being Yadran's man in Hollywood. I was the perfect candidate to interface for them in America. I now had a client. Alone on the Yugoslav road. I attended the Cannes Film Festival in May of 1978, the next year. And at this time, I acted like I wanted it to be. I had a client, Yadran Film. I was very comfortable pitching the services of this Yugoslavian studio. I met so many people, Americans in the business, who I never knew from my dealings, and Europeans who knew of the advantages in shooting in places like Yugoslavia. Terry met me in Europe at the end of the Cannes Film Festival, and we agreed to vacation in Yugoslavia and Greece. I made reservations for us at the Grand Hotel Tuplitz in Lake Bled, where Milan Lulic put me up the first time. The old business adage of you need to have 3 cups of tea with someone before engaging in business, and this was going to be my 3rd tea with Jadran. I had gotten Jadran their money from Colombia. We both thought that we were meant for each other. I agreed to find them work in America. It was between 4 eyes, as they would say. Of course, my friends in the States thought I was crazy. With no contract and no papers, how can you sue them if you need me? There were all sorts of reasons why I was crazy. But sometimes crazy is exciting. They gave me a tour of the studio. I was amazed at the departments that was so well stocked. They had all sorts of vehicles, army tanks, a great wardrobe, props department, and a construction team to build anything. Films were important in Eastern Europe as they played a primary role in propaganda. My meeting with the studio lasted well into the late afternoon. Mike Mielich brought me to the bus station to take me to Lake Bled, where Terry was. I didn't know then that I was going from Zagreb in the Republic of Croatia to Lake Bled in the Republic of Slovenia. They even speak different languages, but they can understand each other. They're like separate countries, which they later became. Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, Herzegovina. They were all put together as a country after World War I in 1919. Anyway, I was stood out from the other bus riders. I was wearing my blue blazer with my one-of-a-kind artistic bow tie, and I had an attaché case. The ride between the 2 cities usually takes 2.5 hours. The road was dark and not many cars on the road. The driver made several stops, and in one of the stops, I saw him turn to me. Thinking he was motioning me to get off, perhaps to change buses, I got off the bus. It took off. Looking around, I realized that I was in the middle of nowhere. I was actually and physically in the middle of nowhere. To this day, I have no idea what made me get off the bus at the time. But I saw a light in the distance along the road and started walking towards it. I learned the Yugoslav word for please, molim, and the word thank you, hvala. And there I was, jacket and bow tie with an attaché case in hand, entering this rural bar in Yugoslavia. I said, molim, molim, please, please, hvala, hvala, thank you, American, Lake Bled. Though I may have seemed to have come from another planet, so many were curious, and many offered to buy me drinks. It was getting late. I had no way of contacting Terry or even the hotel. I conveyed to them in English, German, or whatever I could think of that I had a wife waiting for me at the Hotel Teplitz in Bled. I was drinking with them and getting nervous, but I felt very safe and secure. The people in that bar were wonderful to me. Suddenly, one of the men takes my arm and leads me out, and the other men are joining. We see the lights of a truck or bus coming up the road. The men get out to the middle of the road and flag down this bus. This bus was riding on an angle, like on a broken axle, but who cares? I got on the bus. On this bus were people with vegetables and chickens, very different from the bus that I got off. One of the men gets on the bus with me and says a few words to the bus driver. After maybe a half hour, the next thing I know, the bus pulls up to the entrance of the hotel, a new stop for the bus. My new friend and I get off the bus. I pull out my wallet, wanting to give him a nice tip. He refused it, said goodbye, and left. He was so proud to have helped me. He and all the men in the bus and the bar treated me royally. And that was the power of America then. We Americans on the road are America to the world. Terry was beside herself. In those days, there were no cell phones. I had no idea even how to use a Yugoslavian phone, nor did I know how to get the phone number of the hotel. Communication in those days was not easy. The restaurant at the hotel was already closed. They suggested there was a restaurant about 10-minute walk around the lake. They weren't sure if it was still open. Terry and I quickly did the walk, and we saw that they were closed and cleaning up. I knocked on the door, and with my please, please, thank you, in Croatian, molim, molim, hvala, hvala. Not even in Slovenian, it was Croatian. The owner took pity on us, invited us in, took the chairs off the table, served us food and wine, and wouldn't take a cent. An old expression in business says you need to have 3 teas with someone before you can do business with them. This was now my 3rd tea in a year. I had cemented Jadran Film as a client. Mike Mielich's fear of never seeing the people who wanted to represent Jadran did not apply to me. Mike became my friend, my partner. It was a great trip. Yugoslavia was looking better and better. I can't wait to get this career moving. That was the start.
Thank you, Paul. Your story is enlightening and your storytelling is captivating. You have the ability to seize the day, whatever it is you're offered in front of you, and you've brought light into what it means, the life of what goes on, a producer behind the Iron Curtain, if it was still up at that time, but in communist Russia for sure. And you do it with such clarity and you have such a great memory. And so it's really been a wonderful hour. Usually we talk a little bit between the two writers, but we don't have time. We have our next show coming, but each one of you has given us a full meal. And so I just want to thank you once again, Paul Lichtman and Garrett M. Brown, for a marvelous hour. And television, as you know, waits for no man or no woman. There's a cinephile show coming up at 2:00. So that's all the time we have today. And it was really an exalting and a learning experience for me to hear these two wonderful writers talk about their lives. So thank you once again, Garrett M. Brown and Paul Lichtman.